Today I want to do a beginner's guide to understanding unit stats in Fire Emblem Engage. This will mainly be for newer Fire Emblem players or those who haven't looked closer at your unit stats, but now you want to know more. I will try to make it as simple as possible. We'll cover all the basic stats, how to compute the combat stats, and how we get the numbers in the combat forecast when you're fighting an enemy. I will also introduce the concept of growth rates, which is the behind the scenes look at how your units level up. Let's start off simple with the basic stats. These are the stats of your units and the ones you see on level ups. HP is simply hit points or health points. If it goes to 0, you die. STR or strength is your unit's power with physical damage attacks. Mag or magic is your unit's power with magical damage attacks. Dex or dexterity determines your chance to hit the enemy as well as your chance for a critical hit. This is also called skill in some Fire Emblem games. SPD or speed increases your chance to avoid attacks, and if you have 5 or more speed than the foe, your unit makes a follow-up attack. Speed is slightly more complex because technically it's also a combat stat, so we will come back to it again. DEF or defense reduces damage from physical attacks. Res or resistance reduces damage from magical attacks. LCK or luck is a fickle stat in Fire Emblem. For Engage specifically, it affects your chance to hit the enemy, your chance to avoid attacks, and it's tied to the dodge combat stat directly. Last stat is BLD or build. Build can be thought of as like how big your unit is. A unit with higher build can use heavier weapons better. Not the best explanation I know, but I promise I'll explain it better in just a bit. Technically not a stat, but SP stands for skill points. All you need to know is that you need an emblem ring or bond ring equipped to gain SP in battle. Bond rings give half the amount of SP, but half is better than nothing. Okay, let's now move on to combat stats, and this is where things get trickier. You take the value of your combat stats and compare them with the enemy's combat stats to determine the final combat forecast. Combat stats essentially have a formula made up of basic stats that are also affected by your weapon stats. Weapons have 2 unique stats to keep track of. MT stands for might and essentially is the power of your weapon. WT or weight is just as it sounds, it will affect your total speed. Weapons then come with 4 combat stats and you just add or subtract depending on the values. The first combat stat is PH attack and mag attack, which stands for physical and magical attack respectively. Physical attack uses your strength stat plus the might of your weapon. Magical attack uses the magic stat plus the might of your magical weapon. This total value is basically your actual attack value. There is an exception to this formula, and that is when you're using a martial arts weapon. This game does not tell you outside of a loading screen tip, but martial arts actually takes the average of your strength and magic stats. Strength plus magic divided by 2. You add that to your weapon might to get your physical attack. Despite using magic as part of its formula, martial arts deal physical damage only. If you are wondering why Aleer does not do a lot of damage when punching people, it's because their magic stat tends to be very low. Moving on, it's not listed as a combat stat, but speed basically should be considered one. To get your speed stat, you take the weight of your weapon and subtract your build stat from it. You then subtract that value from your unit speed stat to end up with the in-combat speed. In the menus, it will show this final value, but just know speed is including your weapon weight and build. To make sense of the build in this equation, if your build stat is higher than the weapon weight, then you will get no speed penalties. If build is lower though, that's when the weapon's weight will eat into your speed. This is why it's tougher to double with certain weapons because they are heavy. Let's continue on to hit or hit rate. Hit is calculated with 2 times dexterity plus half your luck. You then add the hit value of your weapons. Does a hit rate stat of over 100 mean you get 100% hit rate in battle? No, it does not, but the higher the better. This is because you will need to compare your unit's hit rate with the avoid rate of the enemy. To calculate AVO or avoid rate, you use 2 times speed plus half your luck. Add on avoid from your weapon. Fast units are tougher to hit, generally speaking. Next is crit or critical hit rate. This is calculated with simply half of your dexterity stat along with any crit coming from your weapon. So if I have a 50 crit, does that mean I will have a 50% chance to crit in battle? No, it does not. Crit chance is offset by the enemy's dodge stat. DDG or dodge is our last stat, and basically it's used to reduce the chance of enemy critical hits. It is the same value as your luck stat plus any dodge from your weapons. As confusing as it is, dodge does not affect your unit getting hit. Only avoid rate matters, so keep that in mind. dodge isn't useless though, a lot of dangerous enemies with high crit weapons or bosses in general come at higher crit chances. Being able to reduce that chance is always good. We started off with the basic stats of every unit. Combined with the stats of your equipped weapon, you're going to end up with combat stats. The combat forecast or the battle forecast screen compares the combat stats of your unit with the combat stats of the enemy. For most players, what this screen says is all you need to know. If it says my unit deals 20 damage, they do 20 damage. You don't need to calculate all the numbers. It's good to understand how we get those numbers though. For damage, you take your unit's physical attack and subtract the foe's defense stat. If you use magical attacks, you instead subtract the foe's res stat. If these values are negative, you would deal 0 damage. Let's continue on. For the hit rate number, we already discussed this. The actual hit rate chance is your unit's hit stat minus the foe's avoid stat. Unless that number is 0 or 100%, anything can happen. Now there is a deeper layer to this hit rate value compared to the number showed on screen. That is out of the scope of this video, but basically there is some number fudging going on behind the scenes. Last value on the screen is critical hit rate, which we also discussed. The true value takes your crit stat minus the foe's dodge stat. By the way, critical hits deal 3 times damage, so yeah, generally getting hit by an enemy crit many times leads to an instant death. To end this video, I want to introduce the concept of growth rates to newer players. This is a term you will hear a lot in Fire Emblem, but it's literally not viewable in game. Growth rates are hidden percentages tied to every unit's basic stats. These determine if your unit will get a +1 in said stat when you level up. If a unit has a 40% growth rate for HP, they have a 40% chance of increasing HP by 1 on each level up. This is slightly more complex because every class also has a growth rate for their stats. To get your total growth rates, you add the unit growth rates with the class's growth rates. These values are only found through data mining, and you have to look them up online if you want to find out more. An average casual player does not need to worry about growth rates really, but they can explain why certain units turn out the way they do in most people's playthroughs. This is also how people generalize which units are good, as well as why some units should be reclassed. For example, you may have heard many people saying Anna is better as a mage. There is nothing in game suggesting this is true outside of noticing, wow, Anna gets a lot of magic level ups. However, if you look at her growth rates, you will see she has a 15% strength growth and then a monstrous 50% magic growth rate that is the highest in the game. This aspect of Fire Emblem can lead to a deeper level of unit building. You can try to see which units may fit certain classes better, and you can then add on certain skills, and now in Engage you can have the incredibly crazy emblem rings. It's very fun to theory craft, but it does also lead into discussions about all the numbers when it comes to optimal play. That is fine, but unless you're playing on the hardest difficulty, you can really get away with a lot of things. Growth rates are also percentages, so even if you think a certain unit with a certain class should be strong, everyone's experiences can differ. That is part of the fun of Fire Emblem games. For some people, one unit may become a god thanks to fantastic level ups, while for others they may just get RNG screwed. If you're feeling like your unit's stats are not doing so well, remember to use those permanent stat boosting items. That's what they're for. Hopefully this video was helpful in understanding all those funky numbers on the side and bottom of your screen. It's good to understand the basic stats of Fire Emblem because they will persist in most games of the franchise. They may appear under different names, but the general idea is the same. Formulas can and do change game to game though, so be aware of that if you plan to play other titles. That's all I got for now. Thank you for watching, and may your level ups be blessed with good fortune. See you in the next video.